I told you, I warned you, there's going to be a question from this video. And in this one, we're talking about what if sunbathing made you fat? I shouldn't be mean. That's Hugh Jackman in his prime, and there's someone who's not in his prime. What if you could feed yourself with sunlight, right? Well, sunbathing doesn't make us fat, but if you were a plant, it kind of would, right? Well, it turns out that there actually is an animal that has figured out how to steal photosynthetic technology from plants. It actually has figured out how to steal chloroplasts from the food that it eats, which technically isn't plants, it's algae, and then keep those little solar plants inside of their cells and live off of the sugar that those things made. And you would imagine it would be very exotic, but it's not. It is a super common sea slug. You know, a sea slug, it's like a snail, but with no shell. This is a slug. It lives in shallow parts of the ocean, right around bays and inlets, and is really abundant on the East Coast and the southeast of the United States. Really abundant. And here she is. Alicia chlorotica is her name. And look at how much like a leaf she looks. I told you in our last lecture that when you see two plants or two animals or an animal and a leaf on a plant that look alike, you should not assume that they're related to each other. What you should assume is that the shape that they take and the qualities that they have are the best solutions for the environment they're trying to live in. So in the last lab, I showed you 3 different desert rodents that were not related to each other at all. They are more closely related to completely other animals than they are to each other. And yet they look alike and they hop around and they live in deserts, and you'd be like, they must be related. Not related. Same thing here with Alicia chlorotica. Why does she look so much like a leaf? It used to be that plenty of biologists would say, oh, she looks like a leaf because she's hiding among things that are like leaves. But the truth is that being shaped like a leaf is the best way to harvest energy from the sun into your chloroplasts. The leaves on trees, that's not random, right? You can get a whole lot of chloroplast in a leaf on a tree, and yet when the wind blows through the tree, the wind doesn't knock it down, not very often anyway, right? So same thing for the sea slug. It's called convergent evolution. Now, she looks like that when she's sunbathing, but when she's on the move, boy, she tucks her little self all together and she's heading out to find probably better sunlight. Now, yeah, she's a mollusk, and we'll talk about that. How does this thing do this, right? It's crazy that she can do this. Well, actually, she just is a snail. And when these baby snails, when they hatch out, they don't have any chloroplasts or chlorophyll in them. When they hatch out, they are completely clear, right? But when they're young, they start eating algae. And here's some of the algae that they like to eat. The algae that they like to eat, see all these little dots? The algae that they like to eat is full of chloroplasts, and they go ahead and eat all of those chloroplasts. Now, the rest of the plant that they're eating, well, they just digest it just like you and I would, and they grow and they get bigger. But the chloroplasts, they go, oh, I'm not going to digest that. I'm going to tuck it away in the cells that make up my digestive tract. I'm going to tuck them away in there. I'm going to keep them alive, and I'm going to allow them to make sugar for me. Instead of those chloroplasts making sugar for the algae it came out of, those chloroplasts are going to make sugar for the slug. So Alesia chlorotica, when it's a juvenile, it needs to eat, and it sucks the inside of the algae out, and it uses most of the algae it eats just like you would, just for energy. But unlike us, for us, we would also rip apart the chloroplasts and kill them and digest them. But they don't do that. They take the chloroplasts and they tuck them inside their own cells. And then, technically, once they have fed, they can live the rest of their lives just by sunbathing and letting their chloroplasts make sugar for their cells to make everything else from, which is crazy, right? So they call them solar powered sea slugs. And we still don't know exactly how this modification evolved, right? As a matter of fact, when you read the scientific literature, there's a little bit of a like, oh, it's this way. No, it's that way. Oh, it's this way. No, it's that way. You're wrong. You're wrong. So they haven't quite decided yet. But we do know that the chloroplasts that are inside this beautiful green Alesia chlorotica, they came from their food. And we do know that it can keep them alive for the rest of their lives. All right. Now, what could we do with technology like this? What if we could make photosynthetic livestock? What if we could make, now this is just in his fur, so this wouldn't work, but what if we could make photosynthetic cows or photosynthetic pigs or photosynthetic chickens, right? If we could make photosynthetic pigs, they don't have very much fur, so maybe the sunlight, it probably wouldn't make it so that sunlight is all that they need, but maybe they could get big with eating less grain. And so in poor areas of the world, if we gave them photosynthetic pigs, they could raise more pigs on the same amount of grain or grass, and that would be a real advantage. We could make chickens that make eggs by using less feed. Now, of course, there are some big problems, but it could be a real advantage. What else might happen? Well, is it a coincidence that alien humanoids that come to planet Earth are usually depicted as little green men? Maybe they're little green men because if you could make astronauts that are photosynthetic, then when they're going from one part of the universe to another part, instead of growing food inside their spaceship so that they can eat food, you could just put them underneath tanning beds, and then they could photosynthesize and they wouldn't need to eat as much food. Right? Okay, there's going to be a question like that. Let's go over some sample questions. In which organelle does photosynthesis occur? Stop the video so you can figure it out because I'm about to tell you, the chloroplast, the mitochondrion, that is cellular respiration, the nucleus, that's where DNA gets held, smooth endoplasmic reticulum makes special proteins, but the chloroplast does photosynthesis. What is the source of the oxygen gas that's released by a photosystem? It comes from water. It comes from water, right? The light reactions of photosynthesis, where do they take place? Pause your video. I'm about to tell you the light reactions are in the thylakoid membrane, right? And the light independent reactions, where do they take place? The light independent reactions take place in the stroma, right? When is the water used in the photosynthesis? Ooh, this looks like a hard one, okay? It takes place in the light reactions, yes, and the light reactions happen in the thylakoid membrane. Wait, those are two right answers. It provides replacement electrons for the photosynthesis. That's three right answers. It gets used in all the above, okay? Alrighty, when is the CO2 used in photosynthesis? In the light independent reactions, that's true. In the Calvin cycle, those are the light independent reactions and they happen in the stroma. So again, all the above, all right? When is oxygen made in photosynthesis? It gets made when the water gets split, but not in the Calvin cycle. and not in the stroma, because the water gets split in the light reactions. So light reactions happen in the thylakoid. The Calvin cycle happens in the stroma. So it's just when the water is split to provide replacement electrons. All right, now you know how to do really well on your quiz questions, and I'll see you next week.